Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Athletic School podcast one more time. Today, we have a guest speaker, Bill Eckstrom. He's the CEO of the Ecsell Sports, best-selling author with the book, The Coaching Effect. In his first TED Talk, he has 4.5 million views. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. I've been reading your book. I've listened to your TED Talk. So I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people listening to us.
Well, thank you, Igor. It's fun to be with you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Bill, just to start, I mean, you talk a lot about growing, and I love when you talk about in your TED Talk, you talk about winning. How winning is important and everything, but not necessarily everyone that loses is a loser, and how growing is more important. And I always have that in my mind about the comfort zone and growing. So my first question for you is, do you think there is growth in the comfort zone? Do you think are we able to grow if we are living a comfortable life?
Wow. Okay. How long do we have, Igor? Great question.
Go ahead.
Growth. Yes, it is true. And we have yet to. We created a model called the growth rings that's introduced to the world in my first TED Talk. And we continually try to disprove that model, but we have been unable to do it so far. What we find in our research is that, yeah, that is correct. Growth only occurs while in a what we call complex environment. And another way to say that is in a state of discomfort. Now, the challenge is when we study, and the reason we do this research is because we in the world of business, we study the impact leaders have and how to, on their teams and how to grow teams, get teams to perform at higher levels. And obviously, we now do that in the world of athletics. And while that statement is true, that growth only occurs in a state of discomfort, one cannot live their life in a constant state of discomfort in a healthy way. We cannot be in that fight or flight, feel for most of our life. We have to have our moments of comfort. We have to have our moments that allow us to prepare for the discomfort, for those growth times. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I was reading on your book, and I had it highlighted because I like when you mentioned it gotta be uncomfortable situation. You need to live uncomfortable, but at the same, it gotta be in a healthy way. And I think that's important. A lot of people miss the small detail that makes a huge difference, because a lot of people, oh no, it's all about being uncomfortable, get out of the comfort zone. And then, but now you have other problems. You have mental issues that you are dealing with right now. So I think that's important. I love when you talk about that in your book. So
yeah, hey, real quick before we get off that topic, Igor, because you brought up something that's very important: healthy discomfort. It's become, it seems like since my TED Talk, it's become cliche. People say, growth only occurs in a state of discomfort, or seems like I'm quoted all over the place, and it's being used. And I don't want it to become cliche, because people have to understand that there is healthy and unhealthy discomfort. Fear, for example, creates discomfort and can create growth, but that's not done in a healthy way, and especially from a coaching perspective. Yeah. So I think people need to be mindful of when they're in a leadership position or in sports, a coaching position, how they use that discomfort in a healthy manner. So you can't just say, get out of your comfort zone. We have to really take a hard look at how that's done and the way it's done.
Yeah, I love that. And so what are some things that we can do to get out of our comfort zone? How can I figure out if, okay, this is out of my comfort zone, or this is my comfort zone? How can I get out of my comfort zone in a healthy way?
Okay, so, wow, such a good question. There are a variety. There's not a single way.
Mhm.
And let's take perhaps the last question first, which is how do I know if I'm in or out of my comfort zone? Um, and let me preface it by saying, not every. So let me back up even further. It is when we get out of our order, when we enter an environment where outcomes are unpredictable, that's what creates discomfort. Okay.
Okay.
There's most of our work in obviously in business and in athletics, it's mental discomfort. Sometimes our bodies don't know the difference, but in the world of sports, obviously, there can be physical discomfort. We know, for example, Igor, when you lift weights, you actually tear muscle fiber and it grows back stronger.
Mhm.
So that's an example of creating discomfort, physical discomfort. The only way to improve aerobic conditioning is through pushing yourself in in aerobic conditioning. There's a reason basketball players run lines and wind sprints to improve that aerobic health. So, but mentally, that discomfort of change it's that simple. What creates discomfort is the unknown, is the unpredictable.
Mhm.
And so the only way to know if we are in that state is to be mindful enough to see how is it affecting our body.
Mhm.
Usually when one's in a state of discomfort, they feel it. And when I mean, it's a physical feel that really kind of starts down in the stomach, but you can probably, as you're nodding, you can empathize with that. So we know if we take the time to just pause and close our eyes and take a breath, we'll know when we're in that state of discomfort. And most often, you can go back and determine what is creating that feel. Now, in regards to how people get there, and this is why the world of sports has been so fascinating. Everybody knows the best way to be in a healthy state of discomfort is to have a great coach. And great coaches know you. They know because what could be discomfort to you could be order or complacency for me, or vice versa. And so great coaches know their people, they know who they're coaching. So that's the best way to do it. A lot of times people will say, especially when it comes to workouts, you'll hear people say, well, yeah, I don't need a coach. I'm good at pushing myself.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, some people are.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is they don't want to coach. Now, assume money's not an object, right? But they don't want to coach because the coach is going to push them in a way that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So they're growing only in the way that they see fit for themselves, not the way someone else can help.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can push myself, but the best way, and the world of sports has proven that over and over again, is with the coach.
Yeah. That's awesome, and I love that because that's something that we have a strength and conditioning here coach at the school, and a lot of people don't like to work out with her because they think their workout is better or they can push themselves better, and it's tricky. It's kind of like you said, like I don't like the discomfort that she's gonna provide me, but I think I'm good enough, so I think that's tricky and that's important. And talking about coaching, in your TED talk you talk about transactional versus transformational coach, and so could you talk a little bit about the difference? Is there one that is better? Is there one that is worse? um, for us, what we should look for. And if you just could go into the details of those two types, please.
Sure. And I love this topic because we continually are refining and understanding more and more about transactional versus transformational coaching. And by the way, if people want to go to our website, they can actually take a self-assessment
Mhm.
for free at the Ecsell Sports website. they can do a self-assessment to determine their coaching style. Now, I'll be candid. I love when people take this. I think it's eye-opening for them, but the reality is it may not be accurate, because we always have a tendency to think we're better than we are when it comes to coaching, and we see that in our research. Now, back to your question. There, obviously, I think a lot of coaches want to get to a place to where they become a transformational coach, where they're transforming the lives of their athletes beyond the courts and field. Transactional coaching is part of that journey. There are transactional components to how people coach every day, and there should be. To develop a practice plan. That's not transformational. That's a transactional activity, right?
Yeah.
To construct healthy drills. That's not transformational. That's transactional. So there are times and places for transactional and transformational coaching. The challenge, I think, is most coaches know how to coach transactionally. Most don't know how to coach transformationally. To get coaches to places where their players feel like they're connected in a trust-based way at a very high level.
Yeah.
Transformational. To get a team environment that feels to the student athlete like they're psychologically safe. That's transformational. To have those in place, and then to be able to challenge each student athlete that in a way that is unique to that athlete, that helps that athlete maximize their growth, that's transformational. And also understanding, Igor, that there are situations and team dynamics that require for transactional coaching. And I was talking about this the other day with somebody. If let's say you're a basketball team and you graduate 10 seniors, and then the next year you've got 4 of your starters, and the next year you're adding 10 new varsity members and 4 new starters. There's probably a lot more transactional coaching that's going to occur on that team. Let me give you examples. Culturally, do they understand those team values? Do they understand how your practices are run? Do they understand those expectations of being a varsity member or member of that team? So there are a lot of how your drills are run. There are a lot of transactional things that the more time's going to be spent in transactional coaching. Now flip it. Let's say you're starting, you're returning 4 or 5 starters or 5 starters, and you only added a few members to the team because you hardly graduated any. It's time for transformational coaching. Because now those people know. Now you can turn it over to them. Now you can expect more from your seniors. You can expect more from your captain. Instead of dictating plays, instead of dictating what happens in the huddle, you could turn to your team and ask them, what are you seeing out there? What do you think we should run next? You can develop different levels of trust and safety the longer the team's been around. So long answer to a short question, but
no, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for. So yeah, thanks. So do you feel like both ways they work in professional sports as well? Because we're talking more in student athletes, and I think I see them more in student athletes in college. Because I feel like sometimes they are more open-minded, sometimes not all the time. But I feel like when it comes to professional sports, there's a lot of ego involved, and it's all about winning because there's money involved and all those things. So do you think that works in professional sports as well?
Okay, wow, that's a really good question. What creates motivation to perform. What creates the words we like to use, you probably read them in the book, discretionary effort. What is it that a coach does that gets that player to work the hardest, to engage more with the team, to put the team first, to do an extra rep, to run an extra lap, to shoot 50 more free throws after practice, to provide a coach and the teammates that discretionary effort? Yes, the same things apply. However, I don't see coaches doing them as much. But here's what I find fascinating. And I'll use Doc Rivers, Phil Jackson. When I think of those people, they were transformational coaches. They found a way in the professional world to coach above the shoulders, coach beyond the sport, and that ultimately is what athletes will buy into. And it doesn't matter whether I'm professional, whether I'm amateur. It really doesn't. It's harder because nobody can prove scientifically that if you coach that way, it'll produce more wins. Now everybody believes it does, but we can't yet scientifically prove that if you put the student athlete needs first and you coach with what we call around the 6 themes, which are connection, psychological safety, structure, communication, skill development, and challenge, those 6 themes, that if coaches execute at a very high level in those themes, not only are they providing the best experience for an athlete, we believe, although we can't yet prove, that the result is more wins than loss, more wins, or how about this? Teams that perform at the highest level. So some teams, let's face it, they have more talent. And so it's not so much about winning, it's about getting your team to perform at their highest level possible.
So you mentioned about physiological safety, and you also talk a lot about connection. How to achieve that as a coach, but also in an athlete perspective? How can we help the team to achieve those things?
Before we started work in the sports field, one of the things we would do is follow around coaches, and I've always been fascinated by coaches and what they do. And it's probably, you're pretty sharp. You were to pick up on those 2, connection and psych safety, because those comprise this relationship theme that we can quantify for coaches and teams. It's those 2 are the most foundational behavioral traits within coaching performance and student athlete experience. So how do they create greater connections? It's by being intentional. For example, when we're looking at teams whose athletes believe they've been provided the best experience, something as simple as individual goal setting. And a lot of coaches will go, yeah, we do goal setting, we talk about goals. Okay, but do they write them down? And after they write them down, do you hold one-on-one meetings with your athletes to review them? Then you hold a one-on-one progress meeting throughout the year to review them. That builds connection. During stretching at the start of practice, I used to follow around coaches, and some high performing and some not, and coaches that weren't so high performing. Here's what was interesting. While athletes were stretching, some of the lower performing coaches, what do you suppose they're doing while their athletes are stretching? What do you think they're doing, Igor?
I mean, I think they should be there with the athletes and help them stretching and everything, but I'm not sure.
They're usually, what we found is they're usually visiting, kind of talking with their other coaches. The athletes are on the floor stretching or on the field stretching, and they're kind of yucking it up with their other coaches. Here's what's interesting.
Yeah.
When we were looking at some of these high performing coaches, while their athletes are stretching, guess what they were doing? They were out walking in the lines and stopping and visiting with the athletes while they were stretching. Everything from like, hey, how's your grandpa doing? I know he was sick last week, to hey, I saw you got a new dog. How's that, how's that working out? Oh wow, those are new shoes, those are cute, whatever that may be. But they are using that time to not connect just with their coaches, their assistant coaches, but they're using it to connect with their athletes. So there's all different kinds of ways. Do you ask about, and this is one of the things we research, do you ask about an athlete's life outside of that sport? Because when you do, that shows the athlete you care about them beyond the sport. Athlete feels connected. And the greater the connection, the greater the trust, the more you can push them, the more they're going to give you as their coach. So let me pause there before. Psych safety is a whole nother realm. But anyway, is that what you were looking for?
Yes, yes, and as an athlete, I can promise you, I can tell you that like it's 100% accurate, because so I transferred schools. I was in Kansas, and then I came to Ohio. And the first day when I came here, we were moving in to apartment off campus, and then the coaching staff came with a bunch of players. They helped us move in. He brought sandwiches and everything for me. So he created that connection, and it's just like you said, like man, when he brought those things for me, and in my head I was thinking, man, I'm gonna give everything I have for him, for this team, because he cares about me. So
Yeah.
that makes a huge difference. And now I'm coaching under 11 boys here, in a club, in a soccer team, and like I've been trying to do that as well, because I think that makes a huge difference. It helped me, and I think will help them throughout their career as well. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then psychological safety is a tricky one. To psych safety is not, it's not something that can be done overnight to create. And what's interesting is every coach we've ever visited with always wants their players to play fearlessly. And you can, I'm sure, believe that and respect that, as well as probably empathize with that, right?
Mhm.
And in order to do that, in order for a player to feel like they're safe to respond to a coach instead of just being an order taker, safe to ask questions, coaches have to create an environment for that to occur. And the way that's done is there's not a single way, but it's how they structure their practices. Meaning, I feel safe, and there's one of the things we know: athletes feel safe when they're consistent.
Mhm.
Practices start on time. The coach always presents themselves in the same mood, meaning that if athletes have to sit there and wonder the mood of the coach when the coach walks into practice, that's bad. They'll never feel safe enough to play and maximize their performance. Sometimes when a coach loses their mind over a bad call with the referee, now all of a sudden, where are the athletes where's their attention? It's no longer on the game and on the field. Now they're looking over at an animated coach, and they're wondering, if not consciously, subconsciously, Igor, at what point, if I screw up, will coach turn that anger or that mood on me?
Mhm.
And coaches a lot of times don't take that into consideration, and they have to be even keel. Most of their perceived leadership acumen is probably developed in the 10 to 20% of the moments in their coaching, and those are always moments under stress. So how coaches handle themselves under stress is a huge contributor to the psychological safety the team feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, all of that, it takes us to one place, which is improving performance, which is, improving student athletes experience, and eventually winning and having better results. So what are your thoughts on how should we approach winning? What should we think about winning? Should we look for winning all the time? Or, like, I know that's not how you think. But just to have an idea. But
Uh,
so how should we approach winning,
yeah. First of all, let me preface that by saying I love to win. And this next line I've heard many times, but it's true, which is I hate to lose more than I like to win. Um, so winning, let's take a step back. First of all, people have to understand that winning or losing is a result of something, and it's the result of input, right? So sometimes there's more attention placed on the outcome versus the input. And when it comes to the outcome, it's okay. And I said this in my second TED talk. I talked about how setting goals that involve winning are healthy. State championships, conference championships, national titles, whatever those may be, Super Bowls. It's okay to set that goal because goals it's proven, they increase team focus and they contribute to discretionary effort. Okay. Now, then once that's done, focus needs to shift from the outcome to the inputs. That's really where most of the coaching attention needs to go, to help people understand that it's okay. You have to think forward. You have to be able to see your future. I get it. We got it. Let's list it. Let's state it. And then let's get off of it. Because every day after that, it's about input. And too many coaches talk about winning here, winning this, winning that. Well, sometimes you can't control that. And as cliche as it sounds, all you can control is how hard you work and prepare to win. Tom Osborne, Nebraska's amazing football coach for so many years, would always say that, hey, football's a weird game. There can be referee calls. There can be an odd bounce of the ball. There can be all kinds of things that can impact that final score. So all we can control is what we do to prepare for that day of competition. So, and from a coaching standpoint, coaches need to set those goals, perhaps have a daily reminder of the goal, but 98% of the work should revolve around, and understanding should revolve around input, not outcomes.
Awesome. And talking about that, there's Tim Grover, which he was the personal trainer for Michael Jordan, all these guys. In his book, he mentioned how people say, oh, it's about the process, not about the outcome, but it's not really how it works. It is about the process, but you should tie to the outcome as well, because just the process without an outcome, it's nothing. And just the outcome without a process, it's kind of hard to get the outcome that you want to. So yeah,
that's really well said, because you're right. That's why goals are needed. Why are we doing this? To achieve X. Okay. So to achieve X, we got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then helping the student athletes understand the why behind A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on.
Yes. So my next question for you, I mean, I had a lot of bad coaches throughout my soccer career, and I had really good ones. So when it comes to having a bad coach that doesn't do anything that we have talked here, as an athlete, is there anything that I can do to not help only the team, but also the coach in a certain way? Of course, it's hard for me to come to the coach and tell him how he should coach, but is there anything that I can do to help help that connection between the coach and the team? Is there anything that can be done through a athlete's perspective?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question as well, Igor. So I'm going to approach that from two ways. Number one, I'm going to start with an anecdote. I was working with a female student athlete one time, and she, in confidence, had shared with me that, hey, I'm having trouble with this assistant coach. You know, he made a comment the other day that, you know, everything's been handed to me. I've never had to work hard, da 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 da. And she was so off put, you know, she was so taken aback by those comments. And she said, you know, Bill, you've always talked about how connection and trust and those things need to be in place, and he's not doing it. And my response to her was, so you understand the need for connection. You understand the importance of developing that. And she said, absolutely, I do. I said, then it's your job to go create it. If that coach is not doing it, you can't play the role of a victim. You can't just sit back and say, hey, he's not treating me well because he's not connecting with me. When you know it's that important, you go do it. And then if he doesn't connect, then you can't, then you can do whatever you want. But right now, you can't play the role of a victim because you know the thing to do. So, point of that, student athletes have a responsibility if their coaches aren't doing it to try and do that. Now, having said that as well, there are times when you just get that coach. By and large, coaches are in the business. Now we're talking some college and high school, they're not in there for the money. College, professional, yeah, they could be in it for the money. I'm sure there's a love of the sport and helping athletes, kids, so on and so forth. Anyway, but we have seen great athletes overcome bad coaching. And like you, Igor, I've had those coaches. And what you can do is, just because coaches are doing it doesn't mean you can't. And here's a simple analogy: just because mom and dad don't get along doesn't mean we can't get along as brother and sister, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where great student athlete leadership needs to step in. That if coach isn't creating the connections the student athletes need to with each other, if coach isn't creating the safe environment, psychologically safe environment, the student athletes need to step in and create their own micro environment. Can the conversations be had with the coach? Of course they can. It's typically hard for coaches to make behavioral changes without some sort of intervention. And that's sometimes a lot of times it's our research. When we understand how they score in connection, how they score in psych safety, that can be an intervention and behavior change kind of moment. It can also be done by student athletes too, by going and visiting and saying, hey, listen, we're not enjoying this. We're not having fun. We feel like you are always threatening. We feel like we're playing in fear, whatever that may be. Those conversations can be had. And hopefully if that's done in a professional manner, coaches may make a change. But if not, players just need to do it on their own.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I think that will help a lot of people understanding, because I've been in many different teams playing for everywhere in Brazil, here, and sometimes they don't have that connection and people just play the victim, like you said. But I think there's a lot that can be done, and I'm glad you mentioned some things that I'm sure is going to help a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches, a lot of teams. Well, Bill, I just have one last question for you, a question that we always ask our guest speakers, is how would you define success?
Wow, how would I define success? I'm going to answer that, and it's kind of a two-part answer, Igor. And the first one is to understand your why.
Mhm.
I think that is so needed for people, because otherwise success can be material things. But if I understand my why, and in my case, my why is growth. Everything I touch, everything I do, I has to continually be growing and improving, not drastically, but just has to take little steps. It's kind of that's why I quit golfing some years ago, is because I got to a point where I knew I could get better, but given everything in my life, I couldn't get better. And I couldn't just resign myself to just go out and enjoy it and not play better than I played a year prior. You know what I mean? So I think understanding your why, and then being able to live that why, to be able to express that why, that is success. That if my why is growth, and I can go out and express that in the way I live, that's really, in my mind, what success is. And too often people have never taken the time in their life to really figure out their why was, and or let that why evolve, but to acknowledge that it is evolving.
Mhm.
So I
That,
think that would be my answer.
that's awesome. I haven't heard of that one before, and we always ask that because um, everyone has their different definition of success, and I think I just love hearing about it because I have my own, but every day I change a little bit after a guest speaker comes in. I always think, oh, that makes sense. I think I might change mine a little bit, so kind of create a different shape every day. So, well, Bill, thank you so much for being here with us. I think it's a lot of good information, and I think it's time to go out there and do all those things that we talked about it. I didn't finish our book yet. I have a lot of highlights, and I'm gonna be posting a lot about your book, about the podcast itself. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Bill.
Well, Igor, thank you so much. And I'm glad people like you do things like this, because we need to continue to spread this message. And thank you also for your work with your 11-year-old soccer team.
Yeah, all right. Thanks so much.
You bet. Make it a wonderful day.
You too.